Hey everyone, I just want to make this little video about versatility in jazz drumming. I was inspired to do this by some conversations I had recently with some other drummers and other musicians. And I just wanted to draw everyone's attention to the fact that there are different ways to be versatile. And certainly, if you want to make a living as a jazz drummer, versatility is important because if you can only sound good in one very specific context, it's going to be difficult to make a living. But there are different ways to be versatile. And the way people often think of versatility is sort of being a chameleon and playing in a variety of styles. Maybe you play a Dixieland gig, you play a bebop gig, you play fusion, you play swing, you do all these things and sort of a chameleon, do all those styles, sound completely different and completely authentic in each of them. No one listening would know it's the same drummer in all of those settings. And that is an incredible ability to have. I highly respect anyone who can do that. Uh, that is not something that I can do, nor is it something that I really aspired to. I was more attracted always to a different kind of versatility, which just having a kind of beat that sounds good with anything. And some of the drummers who I feel really exemplified this, there are many, but just to name a few: Dave Tuff, Sid Catlett, and Jake Hanna. And it's really interesting when you listen to those guys because people will often say, oh, Sid Catlett was so versatile. He could play with Louis Armstrong and he could play with Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie. And that's true. He was very versatile. But when you listen to him in those settings, he pretty much plays the same way. Dave Tuff, oh, he could play with Eddie Condon and then, small group traditional jazz, and he could play with the Woody Herman band, at the time a very modern, cutting edge big band. But again, he pretty much played the same way. Jake Hanna was a complete master of this, and he talked about it. I heard an interview with him where someone said, oh, wow, you're so versatile. You play with all these different kinds of players. And Jake said, well, they're versatile. I stay the same. And Jake was very big on, playing the same way for everybody. He would talk about that. Oh, yeah, everyone gets the same thing. Yeah, everyone gets the same. But, Jake could play with bass players like Bob Haggart or Ray Brown. Sound great with both of them. He could play with Jimmy McPartland and he could play with Roy Hargrove, and they both loved him. He could play with Bing Crosby and Roberta Gambarini. He could do all these very different things, but he pretty much played the same way. I'm not saying these drummers didn't make any changes. They made some subtle changes, but they pretty much played the same way. You could always tell, oh, that's Jake Hanna, that's Sid Catlett, that's Dave Tuff. There was never a question of that. So I was always fascinated by that, how those players could do that. And I think it really just comes down to a swinging beat that has a timeless quality to it that you could put anything on top of. You could take Dave Tuff and you could put Bud Freeman over it, which we can hear on plenty of recordings, or you could put Coltrane on top of it and it would sound good. It absolutely would sound good. Same with Sid Catlett, same with Jake Hanna. Not everybody has that kind of beat that goes with anything. There are some very great drummers, other favorites of mine, and they're absolutely great, but maybe it's not that kind of beat that goes with anything. But that's something, like I said, I always found that fascinating, and I think a lot of people don't really realize that that's another option. That's another way to be versatile. And sometimes with these famous older jazz drummers who are known for their versatility, I feel that people sometimes don't realize how much they kind of kept their playing the same in all these different situations. I want to be clear. There's no right or wrong. There's no one way to do this. I'm not saying, oh, you should do it this way. Don't do that chameleon approach. They're all great ways to approach this. It's just how you want to play and what you want to do. But again, I just wanted to draw everyone's attention to this concept because I just feel that some people are not aware of it. Some of the different situations that I'm in, if I'm playing with a group like the High Society New Orleans Jazz Band, a 7-piece, New Orleans style group, it's different from when I'm playing, let's say, with Ken Poplawski. Uh, with Ken, I play brushes a lot. I pretty much never play brushes in the High Society Band. In the High Society Band, I don't use a hi-hat. In most other situations, I do. There are different little things, but I I don't really think about these different styles when I'm doing it, and I don't really do anything that different. I kind of do the same thing pretty much in all those situations. And there might be some situations where I play a press roll and other situations where maybe I wouldn't. But even that, the feel doesn't really change. I want to maybe make another video about this because I think it's another misconception. But whether you're playing on the snare drum or on a ride cymbal or on a wood block, it's all the same. None of the parts of the drum set have a feel built into them. The feel comes from the player. So I don't think the feel should change. I heard a recording where Jake Hanna played press rolls throughout an entire tune, which is something he hardly ever did. I asked him about it actually, and he said, "Oh, I don't know, someone must have told me to do that," which kind of contradicted everything else he always said about, "Oh, I always play the same way. No one tells me what to do." Uh, but he plays press rolls through a whole tune, but you can still hear that it's Jake Hanna. Another drummer who is a mentor of mine and a huge influence and who I used to hear all the time was Chuck Riggs. And Chuck had that thing. He could play in any context, sound like himself. I heard him in a group that was doing recreations of the Duke Ellington band from the 1920s. And Chuck was playing mostly choke cymbal, which is not the kind of thing that he did when he was playing with Scott Hamilton or somebody like that. But even then, you could tell it was Chuck. His sound, his feel, his aesthetic, it was all the same. And that blew my mind that he could be playing something that I had never heard him do before, but I could still hear, oh, yeah, that's Chuck Riggs. So I just wanted to throw this out there because I said some people are just not aware. It's just another option. So you don't always have to change your playing as much as you might think when you're going from one situation to another. There might be times where you're doing an exact recreation. If you get hired for something like that, which can also be very fun and educational, that might be different. But even in those contexts, again, I think of Chuck doing this Duke Ellington recreation, or if you hear, Chuck also made a recording with Bob Wilbur where they were recreating the King Oliver Creole Jazz Band. And it's fascinating because Chuck, I know he loves Baby Dodds, but Chuck doesn't sound at all like Baby Dodds. So it doesn't really sound like the King Oliver band, but it sounds great and it's its own thing. And Chuck playing on the woodblock doesn't sound anything like Baby Dodds playing on the woodblock, but it sounds great and it almost becomes its own thing. And I think, oh, wow, I wish more people would play the woodblock like Chuck. So it's just something to keep in mind. You don't always have to change your playing as much as you might think in these different situations. And check out these players like Sid Catlett, Dave Tuff, Jake, Chuck, these different players who were able to really maintain their own identity and sound through playing with all these different people, all these different styles, because they had a great swinging beat that sounded good with anything. So I hope this was interesting for some people. It's something that's very important to me. It's something that I've always been intrigued by and that I always try to do. So I just wanted to share this with you in case some other people find this helpful. All right, thanks for watching, everyone. I will be back soon.